Ever seen these 3D animations in MagnatesMedia videos? Maybe you thought that this kind of imagery needs to be created and rendered in Blender, but this is only partly true. Actually, all this is composed inside After Effects, using the plugin called Element 3D. You will also need Blender for some stuff, but honestly you will use it only to export and import some files, so nothing fancy there. Working with Element 3D models in After Effects is as easy as working with any other type of layer in After Effects. Take solid, take PNG imported assets or text layers. So let's jump right to it. So this is how the scene we are going to create today looks like. I decided not to replicate MagnatesMedia's scene, but to create something of my own. And I think it looks really cool. So let's start. So first of all, let's choose what assets we will use in our composition. Here I want to choose kind of an antique statue, maybe from Roman times, from Greek times, something like that. And I use this website called Sketchfab. It has a lot of free 3D models, so you can use it as well. So we search for statue and we scroll down and we see what we have here. So I found this one and I really like it. I think it looks very cool. So let's use this one. Here you should download it and you should choose a format that we will use. You should know that Element 3D supports only this import format, OBJ, so this is the best option for us here, so we just press download. Once we have downloaded it, we go to our After Effects and we create a solid. The color here doesn't matter, just make sure it's the desired resolution. Once we created the solid, we go to our effects and presets and we search for element. This is our Element 3D plugin and we apply it to our solid. Here, first thing, we should press scene setup. We press import and we choose the model that we have downloaded. For me it's the downloads folder, it's this Aaron Grab Johannes Bank folder, and here it has two folders, one is textures and one is source, and we choose this OBJ file and we press import 3D objects. We press OK here. Here it says that model has materials with textures larger than something. Textures will be downscaled to fit. This is okay for us. And here we see that it's very small. If we pan around it, see that it's very small, so we press normalize size. And now we can just rotate it if we want. So we find our orientation settings and we just flip it. So I think it should be flipped by 90 degrees x-axis and 90 degrees z-axis. And here we press OK. So here we are with our 3D model in After Effects and let's rename the layer. So let's go with statue. Now, we might want to rotate it. Let's press R as we usually do. Let's press S actually to scale it up firstly. And now let's press R and let's try to rotate it. And we see that we can only rotate it in one plane. Let's maybe make it a 3D layer, right? Let's try to rotate it in all axes. And this is what happens. So actually it's a 2D object in the 3D world. So this happens because 3D models in Element are not controlled directly. So you cannot just make it a 3D object and rotate it from here. It won't work. So what we need to do is we need to expand here group 1. And here we should press create group null and we should press create. And now you see that if we rotate this null, it will behave as intended, right? So let's just rename it to statue controller, like this. And now we can scale it, we can rotate it, and we can of course position it by pressing P. And it will behave correctly in 3D space. And let's just scale it back to 100% here. So I probably want to add one more asset, which is a temple, like a Greek ancient temple type thing. So I'm searching for temple here and I want to find something that will fit my idea. I think I really like this one. So Roman Temple of Ever. By the way, I will leave all links to all the assets I use in the video description. So here we press download 3D model and here it also has an OBJ format, right? So we should download it. This will be the easiest way. But what I wanted to tell you is that very often Sketchfab projects don't have this OBJ format. So you will have to deal with GLB format instead. This happens very often, so you should know a workaround. So let's just choose the lowest texture size here, 1K, and let's press download. Alright, so I've downloaded the file and here we will need to use Blender. Don't worry, by the way, we won't do anything complicated. We'll just have to import a file into it and then export it in OBJ format. Here's how done. You press firstly import. Remember, we downloaded this format, JLB. We go to our downloads, we find our model, Roman Temple of Evora. We press import. And we wait a couple of seconds. Now it's imported and we press Z to check it in material preview. You see, now we see all the materials that this beautiful model has. Okay, should we export it right now as it is? No, we should do one more thing. You see, if we export it now, like it is, we won't have any materials on it. It will be just plain color. It can be like plain white or plain gray, something like that. So it will look kind of ugly. So to export it with materials, here's what we need to do. We need to go to shading tab and we need to check how many materials this thing has. So it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 materials. And they are represented by these image files. Image 0, image 1, image 2, and so on. So now what we'll need to do, we need to save these images in a separate folder and we'll need to import them inside Element 3D later when we open it in After Effects. To do that, we need to go to UV Editing tab and we need to save each image separately, like this. We press here Image and we press Save As. We choose our required folder. I might want to make a new folder here and name it Temple Materials, like this. And I open it and I press Save as Image. So let's just save all the images like this. So now I have all my images saved, all my materials are ready to go. And here, what we'll need to do now to export the model itself is we'll have to firstly expand this. This is, you see this icon, this represents a null inside Blender. In Blender it's called empty actually, so it's the same as null. It's an entity which controls other objects or entities. Let's just choose all the objects which are parts of this whole thing. And here we'll need to go to export and we'll choose, of course, OBJ, because this is the format which is understood by Element 3D, okay? So here we'll need to choose this, limited to selected only, because we selected everything that we needed to export, right? For example, we will not export this collection, these empties, we don't need them. We only need to export what is selected. Here also press PBR extensions and also press material groups. Now choose the output folder that you need. I use this one, OBJ models for Element 3D. I created a separate folder on my computer and I call it Roman Temple, like this. And I press export. Okay, let's just go to After Effects back again and let's create a new solid, right? Let's call it Temple and let's put element on it. Now let's go to Scene Setup like we did last time. Let's find our model, which is here. It's called temple.obj and we press OK. We press normalize size. And here we see that, like I explained to you just now, all the materials are blank. So we'll have to re-import the image textures to these materials. So let's go from 1 to 0 and let's just import the materials from the folder I have created. So you remember that material 0 is tied to image 0, material 1 to image 1, and so on. So let's just import them one by one, right? You see that temple starts to look normal slowly. And by the way, you should import into this diffuse material, because diffuse in Element 3D is the primary color. Press OK. We import this one, OK, we go to the next one, OK, we go to material 4, press load texture, press OK. And as you can see, now the temple looks perfect. All the materials are in place and now we can press OK. So you see that the temple is quite small, so we'll have to create a null for this temple, and now we can control the scale. So I want it to be kind of this size. I want to rotate it, I think, by 180 on this axis, which is y axis, and I maybe want to move it a little bit to the front, right? Just like this. Okay, so now our assets are in place, and now we can create a 3D camera which will control what we see. And now we should also create a couple of null objects. So we can just create one null object, call it camera control 1, and we can duplicate it several times like this. And we parent our camera to our camera control 1, parent our camera control 1 to camera control 2, and we just chain link them like that. And now what we have to do as well, we have to make all these nulls 3D. So just tap this box. We need to enable motion blur for both statue and temple. And now we can play around with our camera just a little bit. Let's just put preview resolution to 1/4. We don't need it to be this. So now what I want to do is I want to create some kind of camera motion. So let's just do that. So we go to our camera control 1, which is our camera null. We firstly move it to our default position. One more thing you might want to do is to go to your camera settings and choose a preset. Before that, my preset was at 20mm, I think, which is a bit weird for this composition. It will look much better in 35mm. So this is what I will choose. So this is our focal length, right? If focal length is small, the image becomes tilted, so think of wide angle camera on iPhone, for example. If it's 35mm, the image gets more flat. So this is what's more fitting, in my opinion, for this comp. So let's just choose 35 and press OK. So here's how our initial image looks, right? So let's move camera a bit to the back so we can see the temple in full. And let's fly our camera so that we see the statue's face close by. Let's choose our camera control 1 and let's animate the position. I want the flyby animation to be 3 seconds. So let's just find our spot where we want to stop. It may be either this, maybe either this spot. So it looks kind of cool when we see her between two columns, or we can go closer, right? See the face. So we can do like 2 stops. So firstly the camera will stop here, we'll hold it for a couple of seconds, for 1 second actually, and from there we'll do a close-up of the statue's face. So we need to move it even more to the front, as you can see. Yeah, so this is perfect. So now what I also want to do is I want to tilt the camera just a bit, so we're aiming at the front of her face, not like to the 45-degree angle like right now. Let's go here to our position keyframe, and here let's keyframe the orientation. Let's press U so that we can aim precisely where we need to stop, and I think we need either X or Y rotation. I'm not sure now. Yeah, we need Y rotation. So we need to rotate by 35 degrees. And now we also will need to move the camera just a bit to the left. So after you have tilted the camera, the positioning becomes a bit tricky. So you will have to experiment with it a bit and understand which axis you need to move. So here we will have some kind of text. And now we can just highlight all the keyframes and ease them. By the way, by default, easing is, as you know, F9, but I have it mapped to W for convenience because I use it very often. So now let's check what we have got. So the basic animation is done. Now we'll have to make the whole scene more beautiful. The first thing that comes to mind immediately when I see this, when the columns of the temple become closer to the lens of the camera, they don't get blurred. We'll need to make the depth of field effect much more pronounced on our 3D camera. So let's start with that. And also what we will do, we'll add some overlays, some background texture, maybe some sky texture, and we'll create a text animation. And of course we'll add some effects on top, and we'll wrap it up after that. We're back to After Effects, and here, as you can see, I have added one more asset, which is these steps. I also downloaded it from Sketchfab. I won't go into details again how to import it, you already know that from previous steps. I just added it to give the scene a bit more depth, and also to give it some kind of floor, so that our statue and temple are not floating in the air. So what I want to do now, I want to add a sky. So I have this storm clouds video saved. Let's move it to the bottom like this, so it's behind everything else. We need to make it 3D, give it motion blur. Also, of course, we need to give motion blur to steps, and we need to position the sky way back. I would say like 25,000 or so. And we need to upscale it like this. And let's check if it moves correctly. As you can see, it cuts out a tiny bit to this side, so we can just move it to the right and upscale it just a bit more like this. Now it works correctly, I think. Let's see. Yeah, now it works correctly. We'll need to duplicate it so that we can expand our scene a bit, because it cuts out after 10 seconds. So it will be just looped after the first playback. So basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to add some text to the left of the lady. And let's type here, how often do you think about Roman Empire? So just a random text. Don't judge me for this, just the first thing that came to my mind. And let's move it here. And what we need to do, we need to tilt it. As our camera tilts, we also need to tilt it by, see, 27 degrees on y-axis. So just type 27 here, and you can see that this text is now aligned properly. Let's give it this kind of size. So you see it's 3D now. It's floating near her head, and I want it to appear just as we are approaching her face, for example from here. So let's just keyframe the opacity. We'll won't do nothing fancy here. Yeah, now let's give it, of course, my favorite effect of all time, which is deep glow, which is absolutely gorgeous. Just makes everything look instantly perfect. 0.2 exposure, and I think 250 radius. Looks good. Also, as we approach the face of this woman, I want to show like a bit more pronounced thunder strike. Okay, so this is the asset I want to use. This is called Thunder Green Screen. Let's enlarge it. Let's give it this effect, which is key light. We should choose screen color, and we should just tap here. And now we should find the spot where we want to show the lightning strike. So it might look something like this. Let's just solo the statue face like this. So if you press this button, it will solo, so everything else will be hidden. And let's solo the green screen thunder. I don't need this part, the beginning of it, I don't need it. I want to start from here, and I want to move it behind the statue and everything else. So just in front of the storm clouds, but behind the text layer, behind the steps, behind everything else basically. Yeah, so as we zoom in, we see this cool lightning strike. We need it just once, so we cut out from this spot. As I mentioned before, what we should also do, we should give the camera a depth of field effect. So to do that, we go to our camera options here, and we should increase the aperture parameter. So it should be something like, I think, 500. Let's create a keyframe here. The aperture we won't keyframe, it will stay the same, but the focus distance we need to keyframe. So firstly, we need to decide what will be in focus in the first shot. I think it should be the temple. Let's solo the temple and let's give it focus. Let's find the sweet spot here. So as you can see, when we scroll the aperture, it gives us like a preview. So as we remember, the temple was somewhere here. So you see this bar which moves is aperture, the focus point, I mean. So let's also show statue. So you see the statue is blurred, steps are blurred, and the storm clouds are blurred as well. As we move closer, let's see what happens. As we move closer, actually the columns of the temple get blurred and the statue gets in focus. This is precisely what we need. So here the camera stays at the same spot, so it should be the same. And let's check what happens here. So here you see that the face is blurry, and we don't need that. So we need to keyframe the focus distance here. and we need to adjust it so that the face is in focus. So I'm checking here because this bar is not aligned with the statue's head. But if I move it back so that the bar is aligned with the head, it will get in focus, just like this. Okay, and let's check if our text is also in focus. Yes, it is. Perfect. This is basically it. One more thing that we can do is we can go to, let's just unsolo everything so that we don't get confused. So let's get to the statue and let's check render settings and let's check lighting. So here we can add some optional lighting because in our composition we don't have any lights. It just uses some default lights. We can choose a different look which can look much cooler, you know. So for example, this one I chose stylized. It has a colder illumination. It looks more congruent to the background and I think I like it more. So let's just try that for other 3D objects, which are steps and temple. Okay, steps, yeah, render settings, lighting, and stylized. Yeah, it instantly looks like 1,000,000% better. So I'm just lucky with the preset. Here also add lighting, stylized, and let's check our first frame. Yeah, as you can see, it just looks instantly much more better. I think we can maybe make the temple bigger, no? It's a bit weird when it's this small. Should we make it bigger? We lose our cool effect with the columns now, so maybe make it just a bit smaller like this. Let's find a sweet spot. Yeah, maybe like this. But honestly, this is not the point of the video, of my tutorial, so it doesn't matter that much. Okie dokie, so the final step, which is adding effects on top. So let's just add our adjustment layer. Let's just use curves, just to make it, the colors pop a little more, make it contrasty, like this. So make this S shape, you know, when the like the blacks are blacker, the whites are whiter. This is what I usually do. You see, it instantly looks more dramatic with this contrast. It just gives it this pop, this pronounced look. Yeah, so honestly, I don't want to add any more effects. What I will do, I will just add some film grain. I have an asset for that. We don't need to use a grain effect or noise effect, which slows up our render. So I just use this film grain and I just give it overlay mode. Now I have my grainy image. I save my project and I establish the beginning and the end of the render. So let's just make it 12 seconds, because why not? So press N to cut the work area. To establish the beginning of the work area, you should press B. In this case, it will be on the first frame. Let's save it again. And now I will render it out and we'll wrap it up.